Alrighty, well that's 1:30. Okay, so I'd like to say good afternoon and welcome everyone to board meeting for the Board of Directors meeting for the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District, and I'll call to order right at 1:30. So first off, I'd like to recognize that we're conducting our business today on the territories of the Nuu-Chah-Nulth people, pretty far and wide, and we have a fairly busy agenda today. I'm wondering if anybody has any additions or would like to move the agenda as presented.
I'd move the agenda, John.
Thank you, Dr. McNabb. Seconded by, whoa. There we go. Do we have a seconder? Sorry, I missed it. Anything? All right, thank you, Deb. Dr. Haggard. All right, any comments, questions?
How do I get rid of that?
So there's a little bar in between them, and you can shrink the size of what's being shared so that you can have a fuller screen.
Okay.
So you might need to drag it or something. I'm on a computer, so it's different than on an iPad.
Yeah. I'd just like to lose it.
I don't know that you can make it disappear. There may be a few options that you can do.
Okay, figure it out.
Alrighty. Seeing no comments, I'm wondering if we can go all those in favor.
All right.
All opposed. Motion carried. All right, thanks. Good to see you, Doug. Hope you're feeling better. That brings us to declarations. Does anyone have any declarations of conflicts of interest or gifts exceeding $250? I don't see any. Those are some nice salt.
The government gave us 300.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess we can't accept anything from the government then. That's so now, Cal, are those the gifts you've received, or is that? Okay, so that brings us to the adoption of minutes. So item 4A is the Board of Directors meeting minutes for April 22nd, 2020.
Move adoption, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Coots. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Shannon. Any errors, omissions, or comments otherwise on the actual minutes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
All right.
Motion carried. Okay, second up is item B, the Banfield Water Committee meeting minutes dated April 27th, 2020.
Mr. Chair, I would move that the minutes of the Banfield Water Committee meeting held on April 27th, 2020 be adopted.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Second, Penny.
Thank you, Dr. Cote. So, Cal, it looks like you're using your, thank you. You just fixed it. Great. Okay, with that in mind, all those in favor?
All right.
Motion carried. I like your heart, Dr. Bottner. Next up is item C, the Alberni Valley and Banfield Service Committee meeting dated May 6th, 2020.
Move the minutes, John.
Thank you, Dr. McNabb. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
All right, Dr. Shannon got there first. Okay, any further comments on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, we don't have an item 5, no petitions, delegations, or presentations, no correspondence for action.
Director Derek,
go ahead.
We got some background, something coming, like sounds like a TV or something somewhere.
All right, well, looks like it's gone now. Okay, so that brings us to item 7, which is correspondence for information. We have 3 items there. Is there anything that folks would like to pull out? If not, we can just receive items A to C.
I'll move receipt.
Thank you, Director Cote.
Seconded, Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to item 8, request for decisions and bylaws. First up is item 8A, General Government Asset Management Plan, version 1. Asset management is usually, yep. Please go ahead, Terry.
So this plan was brought to the last board of directors meeting, and we had some discussion regarding the future of the building and basically identifying that we need to have a greater discussion about where we might head with this building that has our office in it as we move forward and this building ages. So I didn't think, we reviewed the plan, we didn't think it's a time now to be making those decisions or halting the adoption of this plan to make those decisions, because we're just trying to make sure that we know that we're going to need some money at some point to replace it. But what we have done is added some language around that we need a further discussion with the board regarding what we will do in the future, and as well as adding it into the improvement plan that can be found at the end of each of the asset management plans. So that way we'll remember to bring it back to the board, probably during a strategic planning session or something like that, where we can have a more full discussion about the future.
All right, thank you for that. Any further comments? Okay. All right, we do have a motion in front of us to adopt the general asset management plan. Now that we know that certain things have been taken out, do we have any further comments or a motion? Dr. Cote.
I'll make the motion, the recommendation that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors adopt the General Government Asset Management Plan, version 1.
Director Coots, second.
Thank you, Director Coots. Are there any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item B, which is the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department Asset Management Plan, version 1.
So this was the same idea. This plan came to the last board of directors meeting, and we had a discussion regarding the fire hall. It had had some upgrades, seismic upgrades in 2014 that has extended the useful life of the building, but we don't think that's indefinite. We're not asking for it to be replaced today. We're thinking we're going to get another 20 some odd years out of it, but want to start earmarking funding or recognizing that we're going to need funding to either do another major upgrade to it or to replace it at some point. So again, I've added it to the long-term financial or the improvement plan, and recommend that we adopt it this time.
Okay. Director Cote.
Thank you. Do we have any idea of when we'll be looking at the other fire departments? Prout Lake, just
Prout Lake plan is actually completed and will hopefully be at the board table at the next meeting. Bamfield, we were to go out to do a site visit just as all this COVID stuff started, so we're not sure when we're going to get that one. I think we're looking at a way of doing it more remotely now instead of going out to actually look at the assets. So hopefully later this summer for Bamfield.
Go ahead again, Director Cote.
I'll make the motion if there's no more comments.
Okay, moved by Director Cote.
They'll make the recommendation that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors adopt the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department Asset Management Plan, version 1.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr Bottner. Just give John another chance. Maybe he's just trying to fix his camera.
No, I'm good.
Oh, you're good? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, all those in favor?
All right.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to item C, which is the creation of the COVID-19 Community Recovery Team and Committees, terms and reference and approval. I think this is...
Perhaps Wendy could speak to this one, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, Wendy, when you're there, we go.
Sorry about that. I've got so many computers going. I was
No
clicking
worries.
the wrong button. So basically, this report, we're proposing to create a committee. It's coming out of the ACRD. Sorry, I got to close my window. It's very noisy. Sorry about that. So the regional district and the city of Port Alberni have developed a joint COVID-19 path to recovery plan, which is attached to your agendas. Part of that plan includes the creation of a COVID-19 community recovery team. So we've created a terms of reference for that team for consideration by the board. This would be a committee of the board, a standing committee. So we're just looking for approval from the board to develop this standing committee. And if there's any questions on the terms of reference or the makeup of the committee, I can speak to that.
Mr. Chair, if I could, there was one additional item that we looked at that we identified might be a little bit confusing because the membership has individuals who will sometimes wear more than one hat. We thought it would be clearer if in section 6.2 right now says decisions by consensus, and quorum is simply meant to say is simply a majority of members present. What we think is clearer because of the multiple roles an individual could have is to say decisions by consensus, and then have another bullet that says that quorum is 4 or more members.
Okay. I think that makes sense. I think you should state what the quorum would be. That's a good change.
So if the board is good with that, then we would just need a resolution to adopt as amended the terms of reference, and then the creation of the committee.
Okay, so instead of as presented, it becomes as amended.
Yes, thank you.
Just change one word. Dr. Koh.
Thank you. So I'd like a little clarification. There was something in here about adding members to the committee as needed. So is that if there's something happening in an area, or to include directors, say if there's something happening in Banfield or such, so that they could become part of the committee that makes recommendations to the board?
Yes, that's correct. That's my understanding, yes.
So there wouldn't have to be a board resolution to include somebody, that this is including it now. Just.
Oh, the way that it's written, to include them as full voting members of the committee, you would still need a board resolution to add them because it would change the terms. But to have them come in as kind of ex officio to help make a recommendation, that can just happen. At least that's my reading of how it works. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. Additionally, there's a large number of stakeholder groups throughout the community that are listed, and it is absolutely not an exhaustive list of input that would be helping this committee to make recommendations to both the board and to council.
Yeah, and just for everyone's reference, it's on page 84 of our package, so the list is on the bottom. So we've already been contacted by some groups like the ACOS. They were hoping to be added to the list of stakeholders, so it's not exhaustive at all. And when we do have kind of a big team meeting involving all or some of this group, depending on whether or not it's topical or not, it's not restricted to this list. It's just making sure that we do get some of them down. Are there any other comments? So, Dr. Koh, did you move that, or?
No, but I will.
You will? Okay.
I'll make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors establish a standing committee called the COVID-19 Community Recovery Team, CRT, and approve the terms of reference for the CRT as presented.
Okay.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Haggard.
Just one point of order. Was that as with an amendment to have the quorum be 4? Was that what I heard?
Yeah.
5? Yeah.
Yes.
4.
Yeah.
With
4.
Is that in the motion?
With the amendment.
So
To
the
apply
emotion was
for it.
established in conversation, and then as amended will be referenced by Wendy, as far as I know. But we can mention the 4.
The amendment will appear in the motion.
Yeah.
Yes, it will. Yes.
Not just an amendment. Okay, thanks.
Thank
Okay. Dr. Beckett? Oh, you're waiting to.
No, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge staff's efforts in putting this together, both with the city and ACRD. I'm very grateful for the work that staff have done.
Great. Thank you for that. So that is definitely something that we should acknowledge over time, is just the immense amount of work that needs to be done on the administration side in the city, in the district, and in the other district municipalities within the regional district as well. Are there any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. All right, thank you for that. Okay, that brings us next to the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee, the amendment to the terms of reference and appointment. So we have two separate motions attached to that, but I'll let the topic be introduced before we get to that.
Great, thank you. So at the Alberni Valley and Banfield Services Committee meeting held on May 6th, the committee considered a amendment to the terms of reference for the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee. And the amendment is to reflect the Chucklasip tribe government is a full voting member of the airport service. So it's to amend the terms of reference to include participation from their government on the Regional Airport Advisory Committee. So the amended terms of reference and a recommendation to appoint Director Coates to the Regional Airport Committee is submitted for consideration by the board.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, so we have two separate motions, so we can do the first one, and that was Director Roberts.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors approve the amended terms of references presented to the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee, which includes representation from the Chucklasip tribe government on the committee.
Great. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Koh.
Further, that the, go ahead.
We'll finish this one off first. Does anyone have any comments on that? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? Motion carried.
Second, that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors appoint Director Wilfred Coates to the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee for a 2-year term.
Second, John.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Any further comments? Are you sure you want to do this, Will?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you,
Great.
everyone.
Okay, this brings us to item E, the Banfield Water System Rates and Regulation Bylaw. So there are 4 separate motions.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to this.
Please go ahead.
So we discussed this matter with the Banfield Water Advisory Committee, and essentially it's recommending to amend the current bylaw to be more in line with the other water service bylaws. And so we've improved some of the definitions and other language in the bylaw and brought the fees into alignment with those other bylaws as well. And so we're just looking for ratification and approval from the board.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank staff for their work and helping with the meeting. And I would move the first motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors gives first reading to bylaws cited as F1147 Banfield Water Local Service Area Rates and Regulations 2020.
Second, Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Do we have any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
And Mr. Chair, I would make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give second reading to bylaws cited as F1147 Banfield Water Local Service Area Rates and Regulations Bylaw 2020.
Do we have a seconder?
Second, Roberts.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
Mr. Chair, I'd make the motion that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors gives third reading to bylaws cited as F1147 Banfield Water Local Service Area Rates and Regulations Bylaw 2020.
Great. And do we have a seconder?
Roberts.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Roberts. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Motion carried.
And finally, Mr. Chair, make the motion that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors adopt bylaws cited as F1147 Banfield Water Local Service Area Rates and Regulations Bylaw 2020.
Second, John.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item F, which is the yard waste tipping fees bylaw amendment R1029-2.
So, Mr. Chair, on this one, we discussed this last week with the AVB committee, and they were supportive of the change. And essentially, the change is implementing a flat rate fee for yard and garden disposal at the landfill, and it's a $5 charge for residents. The committee wanted to ensure that this was a residential program and that commercial haulers would still pay the regular $120 per ton rate. And so we're recommending that amendment. And the other piece to the report is that Heather was successful in getting grant funds through the Fire Smart program. And so she's moving ahead with a free drop-off event within Alberni Valley at 4 different locations. And I believe it'll start next week.
That's great. Okay, any further comments or questions for Rob? Go ahead, Director Cote, and then Director McNabb.
Thank you. So the drop-off places where the free debris will be brought to are, can you please identify them?
Sure. So it's the 2 Earth, Land, and Sea locations, the one on Tebow Avenue and Caesar Road, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Hetherington Yard on Wallace Street, and Berry and Trucking Yard on Glenwood Drive. And it will be between May 19th and the 23rd, between 9 a.m. and 4:30.
So it excludes the landfill then?
Correct. We're not accepting free material at the landfill. Instead, we're offering the $5 per load.
Okay. Okay, I have Director McNabb.
So I don't know if it's available, but I'm wondering what the current income from the $120 per ton of the oversized material is at the moment for 2019, if that figure is available.
Terry, do you happen to have that number handy?
I don't off the top of my head, no, but we can definitely pull that information from our new software system. So we could bring that back to you at the next board meeting. If you...
What my concern is that we're attaching, we're getting some money for these larger branches at the moment. And we're going to put in a program that, you know, may give us less funds overall, and everybody's going to pay it, versus the ones that we're actually conforming to the existing plan, weren't paying to dump, you know, the 1-inch branch and smaller. You know, I myself went out with several loads and made sure that they were, measured them to make sure that they were undersized, and then took a load of oversized out at the end. You know, and the whole thing was, I mean, in the case, that particular example, I took 3 loads out of small material, so that would have been $15. And then I took another load out of big materials, which I paid at the time $10 for. So I would have been paying $20 to take all of this stuff out versus you know, like it would have cost, I paid $10. Now I'm going to pay $20. And to me, I'm not sure it's really going to fix the problem, quite frankly. I think it's going to create backlog at the way spot there, and because everybody's going to have to buck up $5 versus the ones that could, you know, obviously it was undersized, or at least they committed to it being undersized, and we're just going through. We already have an issue with traffic out there, and it's going to make it worse. But I mean, the other part of this is I'd like to see this extended for 2 months versus 1 month to get us out of this COVID area and into normal life, hopefully.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. I see you there, Director Roberts. Dr. Coots, I saw your hand moving when we were asking for comments. Did you have any comments? How did you disappear? We'll go to Director Roberts now.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm kind of hoping, and this is directed to Mr. Williams, that we might be looking at a similar project on the West Coast. And just to let everybody know that on the east side, the RDN is currently charging $8 for garden waste. And a private company almost across the road is still at $6. So you're getting a pretty good deal in the Alberni Valley right now.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add a few comments.
Please go ahead.
So the purpose of the initiative was to help with the open burning issue that we have in the Alberni Valley, and to hopefully encourage people to dispose of the material in a more appropriate manner. And the $5 fee piece was to help manage the traffic issues at the landfill. We felt if we did have a free program, that was just going to add more traffic and congestion and issues. And so that's kind of where the $5 fee came from. We don't know at this point, to Director McNabb's point, if that $5 fee and the revenue generated will cover the cost of chipping the material. That's going to have to be determined as we see how successful we are. And in terms of the West Coast questions from Director Roberts, we haven't looked at that yet. I don't know if we have as big of a burning issue out there, but definitely something we can look at moving forward.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, it looks like we have multiple motions here. It looks like it's the same number of 4. So do we have anyone who can move the motions if we're okay with going in that direction? Dr. Cote, please.
Thank you. I'm having a little bit of second thoughts here as well, that there's these addresses where you can bring debris seem to be all within the city. Am I correct?
I believe the 4 locations are all within the city. But
so
open
that would
to
benefit the city, but not the rural areas. So is there any provision for Banfield, or is there any provision for Long Beach as well?
I believe the grant that Heather got was specific for certain jurisdictions, and I don't think the West Coast was included in the grant. I'd have to double check with Heather.
So
I'm here if I may, Chair.
Oh.
Yeah, Penny, the 4 locations are in the city of Port Alberni. Sizey Road is on the south end of town, Wallace Street, Tebow Ave on the north end of town, and then J.W. Barry on Glenwood, which is also central. we couldn't accommodate the landfill just because of the current increased demand at the landfill. The grant is funding this program. The grant was for the Alberni Valley and Bamfield, did not include the West Coast because the grant was formed around our community wildfire protection plan. So we have other funds in this program for other options such as curbside pickup and bin programs, and we hope to roll those out later in the year. It's just been difficult with COVID and running the Emergency Operations Center, but this is the first start. This is for 4 locations in the city for a whole week, and we're hoping that the residents that live in these areas will use this service.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments or questions? Okay.
Mr. Chair, if there's nothing else, I'm happy to move the first motion that the ACRD Board of Directors gives first reading to the bylaw cited as Alberni Valley Landfill Tipping Fee and Regulation Amendment R1029-2 2020.
Thank you. That was Dr. Johnson. Thank you. Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
I'm happy to continue with the next motion that the ACRD Board of Directors gives second reading to the bylaws cited as Alberni Valley Landfill Tipping Fee and Regulation Amendment R1029-2 2020.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Bottner. I saw your hand go up. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And Mr. Chair, I'd make the motion that the ACRD Board of Directors gives third reading to the bylaw cited as Alberni Valley Landfill Tipping Fee and Regulation Amendment R1029-2 2020.
Thanks. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Shannon. Okay. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And finally, Mr. Chair, make the motion that the ACRD Board of Directors adopt the bylaw cited as Alberni Valley Landfill Tipping Fee and Regulation Amendment number R1029-2 2020.
Seconded, Roberts.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item G, which is the Prout Lake Water Access and Marine Patrol Program.
So,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Director McNabb.
I see on page 114 that there appears to be another motion.
Did we miss one? 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think we've done 4. Maybe I've accidentally. 1, 2, 3. So I have seconded by Director Johnson, Director Bottner, Director Shannon, and then Director Roberts. So that's 4.
But 114, the next page, has a motion that
was from May 6th.
That's from the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Services Committee. It's just been attached to the report.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for clarifying, though. That's important. Okay, I gotta get back to the front.
Just a comment to Director McNabb. Your rattan furniture looks really nice, but we can't see your smiling face with your tie.
You're lucky. I can't see what you can see. So.
Oh, okay. Thought maybe it was on purpose. Sorry, John. There should be a way to turn it around like a regular phone camera too.
I don't know.
Oh, he did it again. Okay, one more time. There we go. Yeah.
We're good.
Okay, so that brings us to where am I now? Yeah, item G, the Prout Lake Water Access and Marine Patrol Program.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to this one as well. So two pieces that we discussed last week at the ABB committee. This first one was about lake access at Prout Lake. specifically that because the provincial park's been closed, boaters have been trying or finding other alternative accesses around the lake, which has caused problems for some of the local residents in terms of traffic and at unofficial or undeveloped launches stirring up water that people have freshwater intakes at. And so we reached out to the province to see if they were willing to block access, and it didn't appear that they were interested in doing that. But I think that issue could be resolved with the announcement that the park will be opening this week, tomorrow, which is a transition to the next piece, which is around the Marine Patrol program and the future of this summer with the program. So the committee was reluctant to make a recommendation last week on where we should go, pending, what was to happen with the park in terms of announcements. And so, like I said, the news is that the park is opening tomorrow for day use only. And to our understanding, that includes the boat launch. But again, it's just day use, and possibly camping will be extended come June 1st. So we've outlined, some of the challenges that we could face if we were to move ahead with the Marine Patrol program this year with the COVID pandemic happening, as well as some of the work safe requirements. And considering all of this information, we're not sure that we can provide the quality of program that we have in the past, considering all this information. And at this time, we're recommending suspension of the program until next year. I'll stop there.
Dr. Cote, you had your hand up, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for the background that you've gotten for us. I believe that the boat launch will be busier than ever with day use only. I'd imagine that there won't be any permit to be able to leave your boat trailer overnight at the park, seeing as how it will be closed. I would really like to look at the Marine Patrol as being a different kind of service this year. I think that I've already had a call regarding one student that's interested in applying for the Marine Patrol. I think that if we are able to provide the proper PPE and proper guidance as to social distancing, people are in their vehicles, in their boats, just directing the traffic and helping the provincial park out at that point. Also, there's nobody that's able to assist for anybody who's has a breakdown out on the water or there's a problem. It would be really nice to have that service available. It would look different this year, but I'd really like to see us take a look, and if things go wrong, well, then we can always let students go, saying that it's not safe. But at this point, I'd really like to see the program come forward, with knowing that the boat launch is going to open. Thank you. I'd like to hear what other directors, how they feel. I think that it would be safe, and I think it would be a really good opportunity for students that are having very little opportunities for employment this summer. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other comments? Dr. Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. A question, maybe Rob can answer this. Do we have, if BC is opening the parks, are they providing staff to monitor the parks that they are opening for day use, or is that up to the local areas?
I don't have details on how they plan on operating. I've asked for more information specifically to Prout Lake, but I haven't received it yet. But my understanding so far is they're going to be relying on their existing operators to help manage the day use opening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we could expect, sorry, Mr. Chair, we could expect then that BC Parks will have some employees there to help with this.
Potentially.
Potentially, okay.
Okay. So I have Dr. Cote, Dr. Haggard, and then Dr. McNabb. Did I miss anyone else? Dr. Roberts.
Thank you. Just to shed a little information. BC Parks, the provincial park, Prout Lake Park, has a caretaker contract. So there is a contractor there that has a couple of employees. They do cleanup and that type. Sorry. And that type of how do I turn this off? Just off. There. So they have a caretaker service, but it just does garbage and gets fees from campgrounds and monitors. They don't manage the boat launch the way that the Marine Patrol does. It's a service that has been provided by the regional district for, I'd like to say 15 years. No, it's more than that. 17 years maybe. People quite rely on the service as far as getting the right information out. They've done boat checks to make sure that people have proper life jackets, proper equipment. The RCMP work with them to give them the information that they need, the training, so that they can monitor what's going on. Besides the provincial park, the local parks, the Prout Lake parks, are not. We have a caretaker at Cougar Smith Park, and we have footprint security at Faber Park. So, but nobody in place there. So, just wanted to add that information regarding parks. Thank you.
Sorry, I have Director Haggard and then McNabb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if we could ask staff, how much is budgeted for this program for this coming year? I couldn't find it in the report. Thank you.
I'll have to take a look. So it's probably going to be about 30,000. We had budgeted more than that. It's a school program because we got grant funding for the Marine Patrol students to go in to educate the younger students on life jacket safety and that sort of thing. So that part of the program, which we budgeted for, we won't be running. I believe last year the program cost us just over 30,000 to run for the year. Just looking here. Yeah, 38,000.
38,000. Is there a follow-up or all good? Okay, so we'll move to Director McNabb and then Director Roberts.
So the way I kind of look at this is just the logistical aspect of it. First of all, we budgeted for a replacement boat this year on the basis that the previous boat was timed out. So I don't think that boat has been sourced or ready or anything else. So I don't know what the condition of the previous one is. I've seen it. I don't know if it's even seaworthy at this point in time. But the other side of this is that if we've got young employees that are put in a position that has basically no senior supervision, we can't ensure that they're going to be monitored in a way that's going to be safe for them in contact, social distancing, any of that stuff that we've all been through in the last while. And the people that are accessing the marina can come from anywhere. So, on that logistical basis, I don't see us, I think the cost is more than the benefit if we put these young people in a position where we can't be sure that they're going to be safe in doing their employment. The government does have programs with regards to offsetting student employment, so I'm not really particularly worried about that. the aspect of the service that they provide, it's going to be a zoo at that boat ramp. I was just by Qualicum Beach on the weekend driving down the road, and I've never seen so many people at Qualicum Beach ever. And so I suspect that once that gate opens up, they're going to be wall-to-wall boats, trailers, people that don't know how to back up, all the rest of that. But we have to be concerned, as staff has indicated, with the safety and security of those individuals and with their training as well. So I think we're really behind the 8 ball on this. It is a really valuable program, or else we wouldn't be maintaining it as long as we have. But I think we got to step back from it and say, you know, we just can't do this right now. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I comment?
Yes.
Thanks. In terms of the costs, it's actually there's money budgeted for float repairs to the boat and engine replacement, not full boat replacement. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Then we have Dr. Roberts next.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm in agreement with Director McNabb on this. My concern would be principally the young people or young person, or however that program works at the boat launch. I've seen them there in the past, and they do a terrific job. But as Director McNabb mentioned, there's probably it's going to be a zoo there with people trying to get out there. And unless Parks Board staff is willing to supervise this, at this point in time, I'm really concerned about the young people. So I don't think it's a great idea at this point, but I think we can play it by ear and see what the government comes up with as far as continuous opening is concerned. Then maybe perhaps we can revisit the whole program. And thanks for that.
Okay, are there any further comments? We do have a motion here, and that does allow for us to revisit this if and when things get even better for the island health situation. As summer goes by, things may open up. Dr. McNabb?
Okay, I would move that the ACRD Board of Directors approve that the 2020 Prout Lake Marine Pro program be suspended until 2021, or when it can be delivered safely. I'd add the or so we can bring it back. We can figure it out earlier.
Yeah, so or would be right after 21 and before when,
Yeah.
and then that would just be the
Correct.
addition. Okay.
I second that, Director Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Okay, as long as we understand the meaning of that is that we have to bring that back here. We're not designating anyone to determine whether or not it's safe. We will determine that once a report is given our way. Okay, so with that in mind, are there any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. All right, that brings us to the item H, which is the Alberni Valley Electoral Area Transit Feasibility Study.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to this one. So we discussed this matter as well at last week's ABB meeting. It's kind of been a long-standing project that BC Transit and the community has been working on in terms of looking at rural transit in the Alberni Valley. There was some options presented last year to the committee and the board, and there was support to move to public engagement on those options. And so really it was a report back on what they'd heard from the community, and they put forward a recommendation out of the two options, which was a direct fixed route from Prout Lake to Walmart. And so the next step would be to work with BC Transit to put this in their 3-year transit improvement program plan. And so that was the recommendation, which was supported. And now we're just looking for further endorsement from the board. Implementation would not occur for another couple of years. It's going to take a lot of time to flush this out and bring it to fruition if that's what the board decides in the end.
Great. I think that's an important thing to note because Director you have your hand up. So please go ahead, Dr. Koh Chang.
Thank you. I have received a lot of grief over this recommendation going forward. There's a perceived notion that this will be a city bus that comes out to Sprout Lake to bring whoever criminal element wants to come out. So I'd really like to have more information brought forward on what the study would actually be about. When this started many years ago, probably about 12 or more years ago, looking at improving the handy dart service that comes out to this area. Paratransit was introduced quite a few years ago as well. And it looked like a really good option that could assist the people that live at Sprout Lake to actually be able to age out in place. At this point, with the objections that I am receiving from the community, and it doesn't help that the local news actually put out a poll asking the city of Port Alberni if they wanted a bus service out to Sprout Lake. With COVID, I think that that's really heightened the fear of residents at Sprout Lake, fearing that more people would be coming out to Sprout Lake than are already with the increase of people. So at this time, I'd like to use the option to defer this initiative to a later date and get a little more information out to the communities to actually show what this service is intended for. The handy dart service is not going to be able to comply with the amount of people that are going to need this service in the future. Give 5 years down the road, there's so many seniors that live out at Sprout Lake right now. When you're in your 70s, 75 is a big jump. And bus service, I have actually talked to a couple people that would like this service to happen. But at this point, I'd like to make the motion to defer this initiative to a later date. Thank you.
Is there a seconder to that motion? Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, we'll hold off on that. I have Director Minions and then Director McNabb for comment.
Thank you. I understand the comments from Director Cote, and I've seen some of the negative feedback as well. I was really disappointed to see a online petition going around and the comments that were included in it. To me, it read, "We don't want people living in poverty coming out to our lake." And in my opinion, that is a very upsetting and disappointing mentality to be out there. And I would suggest that we don't buy into that. I don't think that that's representative of the feelings of the people who live at the lake. And it was really disappointing of me, or to me, to see that something like that could be gaining traction in our community. I think that we have to look really at the bigger picture here and remember that this is a very early first step. I think that what we see here is that we haven't put enough importance on communications up front. And so people don't have the information that they need to determine if this is a service that makes sense for our area or not. But I would very much like to move forward, continue with exploring if it is a service we want or not, that the whole valley, the whole area wants. And I don't think that we should let what is honestly a very disappointing and upsetting kind of commentary. I don't think that we should let some of those stereotypical comments stop us from exploring a service. And I don't think that we should let that take over the dialogue. There's a lot of value to this service or to exploring it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have started the process. So I would say that we push past that and let the public be kind of integrated, or let the public be have their comments in a better format. Thank you.
Well said. Dr. McNabb? Oh, you're You're on mute.
The logistics of this particular effort are kind of, they don't support kind of moving ahead in the format that they've presented it. At the current cost that they've predicted, it would be $40 a ride. And like the cost would be 40, with the recovery would be like $2. So I think it really needs to be discussed amongst us. What BC Transit did was sort of amongst their staff and their providers and other things like that. But we've never sat down as a board or as a committee and actually gone over what we want to provide and what our limitations for cost would be, and what the whole thing would look like. You know, they did a study, they eliminated some of the things that like Beaver Creek was interested in, that Cherry Creek was interested in. They eliminated it completely, and then suggested that the service that should be provided would be one from Walmart to Prout Lake. So I mean, to defer this to me is to look for another date where we can actually sit around together and go over what we really want to put out there, and then, you know, start that process from there. Because if we put out what they've got right now, it's ridiculous. I mean, we might as well have a taxi sitting out, you know, at both ends, and we can pay the taxi all day long for probably $20 a ride. So, you know, it just doesn't make logistical sense at the way it's being presented. So I'd like to talk about it at a future meeting. I don't know if we can clarify that as far as deferral is concerned, but you know, it's got value, but we have to quantify it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments in regards to this? Director Roberts?
I'm just wondering, through the chair to Mr. Williams, is there an opportunity to get more detail on this that we can bring back to the board and have a closer look at it? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could comment on this. In terms of the plan and BC Transit's involvement, I'm not sure what capacity they have to put more work into this. They do have limited planning resources. We have been fortunate enough to get to this point with this plan. I don't know what else to say. I mean, we could potentially facilitate from a staff perspective. I've got a pretty good handle on the transit service file. I could potentially help facilitate a discussion with the board on trying to flush something out. I guess we need to know from a staff level, what are the main concerns? If it's cost recovery, I can say from experience that the high cost per ride is normal for rural transit systems. You just don't have the density to increase that revenue. And so the cost per ride is typically quite high. And that's obviously a decision for the board on what the threshold is they're willing to accept. But yeah, I think those are my initial comments.
Okay. Director Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I'm reading the motion correctly, we're not approving it. We're just saying we want to approve it for further consideration. So to me, that is actually deferring it. We're not approving it today. We just want further consideration on regional transit from Walmart to Prout Lake. So I think that we would be okay to approve this motion and still keep within the boundaries of those concerns that are being expressed today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's my understanding of how this would work. I think the discussions we're having now can be incorporated in any feasibility discussions that Mr. Williams can facilitate with the feasibility study folks. I did see Director Minions and Dr Koh Chang with their hands up though. So, and then Dr. Shannon. So Dr. Minions.
I actually did not have my hand up again.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was just Dr. Koh Chang then. Please go ahead, Dr. Koh Chang, and then Dr. Shannon.
Thank you. I'm not willing to move forward on this at this time. getting more information is what is important, and getting a better idea of what the service is and what it isn't intended to do, so that the community, I'm very disappointed in the action and the comments that came out of residents from Prout Lake myself. It's been quite a few comments and a petition, and I've spent a lot of time trying to talk to my residents of my area, trying to explain what the intention is, and really not addressing what the negative comments have been. And I understand how it feels to be, being called what the city is. But right now, it's not the city's support that's needed. It's the rural area directors. This is the rural area service. And that's what the intention is to be able to allow people to age at home. And if there's no support for it from the community members, and there's a lot of community members at this point that are objecting to even going forward with a study. And I believe that a big part of it is the COVID fear. So right now, I think is not the right time. I'd like it to go back to the electoral area directors to have more comment, more input. So that's why I made the motion, and I'd like to make it again to defer this initiative to a later date. Refer it to the electoral area directors for further investigation as to how it should be brought forward, so that it can be supported. Because at this point, it doesn't sound like my community will. And when something comes out and people make comment, and you're backtracking, it's very hard to go forward. So I'd like to make that motion again.
Okay, so we do have a motion that's been proposed by Director Cote. I do note that Director Shannon has commented after that, though. So do we have a seconder? Going once? Okay. Director McNabb, you second?
I seconded the first motion. We got two motions here now?
No, there's only the one motion, and there was no seconder, so we moved on.
No, I seconded the first one.
Oh, it's too late.
Same
so
one.
You second it this time now.
Okay. Well, I second the second one.
All right. All right. Thank you. Okay. So we have a motion by Director Cote, seconded by Director McNabb. Any further comments, Director Shannon?
Thank you. So I have kind of a question first for Rob, and then a couple comments. So Rob, my understanding at the Alberni Valley and Banfield committee meeting was that for further consideration going into the study, that is to be funded by BC Transit, or did I misunderstand that?
The work completed to date has been covered under our existing agreement with them. There was no additional cost from the regional district for what they've done to date. I don't know if they would charge us more to pursue this further, because I think in their mind, they've brought forward a recommended option, and now it's either implementing this with more details to come, or abandoning or starting from scratch on something else.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
And then I guess my comments are I think I want to echo what Director Minion said, and I think communication has been a struggle with this, because I know we did public input in October of 2019. And I mean, I know BC Transit in their presentation said they were happy with 32 people responding, but to me, that's not a very high number. 21 were online, 7 were, I can't remember, it was like written or in person, and then we had an open house. Like, to me, it was not very well attended, but there was opportunity for that. And of course, we see this a lot where we have public input opportunity, and until it kind of gets further along, people don't necessarily realize it's happened until we're farther into the process. So, I mean, that's where I understand that the Prout Lake kind of topic came up, because obviously on that phase of the study, there wasn't enough interest in Beaver Creek, Cherry Creek for them to pursue that looking forward. I was under the understanding that if it was going to be a study and if we're going to go forward looking into it, that would be covered by BC Transit, but obviously I got that one wrong. It sounds like that they covered up to now. I would be interested if they had any comments for if this was to be looked at further, what the cost is going to be for us or if they're covering this. Thank you.
Okay. So I have Dr. Bottner and then Cote next. Dr. Bottner, I think you just disappeared. Okay, in her absence, we'll go to Dr. Cote. When she reappears, we'll go to her. Dr. Cote, and then Dr. McNabb.
Thank you. When we talked to the BC Transit, when they did the presentation, it was my understanding that they were paying for the study. Mm-hmm. So, but also just some background. I feel like directors from the past. Just to say that there's been communication with BC Transit since 2012 regarding transit to rural areas. So this is sort of an ongoing, this is a new phase or step, but there has been community consultation in the past and coming from other studies as well. The seniors aging at home, I believe is what the last study was. And that's where information, people want to stay at home. The Island Health is promoting people to stay at home. So providing services for them is part of where we as regional directors need to be looking so that people have supports going into the future. It's just that they have to be identified as what they are. And I don't think at this point, this study is bringing forward what the community is asking for. Thanks.
Okay, I have Dr. Bottner and then Dr. McNabb.
Yes, I just think that there needs to be some clarification for sure of the cost. And the other one is to clean up the information that's already out there. I would think that it's kind of difficult to be able to go ahead with anything if everybody's having the wrong information out there to start with. So it seems like to me, we need to take a step backwards to make sure that everybody is seeing everything the same way. Thank you.
Okay, I have Dr. McNabb and then Dr. Minions, and then I have a comment.
So what I'm looking for is a point of clarification. If this were something that we were going to go forward with, it's a service, does it require a referendum? It's a new service.
That would be a decision that would be made after the feasibility study was completed.
No.
Would it not?
I don't think so. I think if we're going to ask our taxpayers to pay for a service, it has to go to referendum.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm asking
feasibility
staff.
study would be, yeah, I know.
Mr. Chair, the report does reference needing to clarify who the participants would be and what the governance model would be. And ultimately, it would have to have a service establishing bylaw that would have to have the assent of the electors, which could either be done through AAP or providing it's within certain financial limits or a referendum.
Thank you.
Thanks. I have Dr. Minions.
Thank you. And thank you for the conversation on this. As I said earlier, I don't want to let an unnecessarily negative conversation with a lot of stereotypes and just a lot of fear stop us from moving forward on this. But that said, what I'm kind of starting to hear now is directors talking about maybe feeling like we did move too quickly and maybe there is more options we want to explore in terms of more regional transit rather than just one, Walmart to Prout Lake bus. I think if that's the case, if we feel like maybe we have not gotten it right, how we want to move forward, even with the feasibility study, then I would be fully supportive of sending this back, more conversation, and determining if we do want to look at, a bigger picture transit system here. So I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation. I think transit and accessibility is a very valuable service, and one that, frankly, I think in the entire Alberni Valley and in the city of Port Alberni specifically as well, we haven't always put enough value on. If this is about trying to get it right and making sure that if it's going to take 3 years potentially to implement, that we are starting from the right spot, then I'm fully supportive of taking a step back and re-looking at it. But I don't want to let concern about fear in the regional areas because crime in the regional areas because we're going to let people take a bus to Prout Lake. That's not the conversation we should be having. So interested to hear other directors' comments. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to lean in here and state that I think the way forward should be to respond to the whole idea that somehow, criminals are going to be coming to Prout Lake when they can just as easily do that in any way. And I don't think any bus drivers are going to let TVs onto the bus anyway. So that being said, I think that's something that should be completely ignored and spoken out against at that point, which I guess is what we're doing. One thing I will note is that this is not an electoral area only discussion. Any inter-district or inter-area transit is something that includes the entire regional district, and it follows that public transportation is one of those things that carries with it as many opportunities or more than costs. And as a result, I think that's something that should, in fact, be pursued, especially in a feasibility study such as this. It seems to me that wanting to push this back for the reasons of COVID doesn't make sense, given that this could be a permanent or very long-term service, and we can start that work now. Second of which is that pushing this back without a follow-up motion that will establish that we will do something like that at minimum comes to me as being either an unintentional or an intentional way of just killing the idea entirely. So I would say that we should move forward with this and explore further expansion. And we may not do that, but then we'd at least have this as a minimum. So I think that it makes complete sense for Prout Lake to be connected to the rest of the valley through public transportation. And I think that there are concerns, once they're sussed out in a way that makes sense rather than just generally, can be addressed in the work that happens afterwards. So for this particular motion, I'm going to vote against it. And then I'm going to ask that we move forward with it and do things in such a way to answer questions before we get to a point whether or not we decide there's an alternative process or a referendum, because there is time to do that. But why would we waste it in any other way other than delaying to kill? And that's what it comes off as to me. So with that in mind, we'll have 2 comments before we go to a vote. Dr. Koh.
Thank you. With what I had mentioned earlier, with the negative information that's out there, without going back and rethinking this and coming forward with the proper information, it's not going to go anywhere. So I'd really like to do a restart on this. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to defer or delay? 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? Motion defeated. Okay, so that was... Okay, moving forward. Is there anything else we'd like to do? Director Osborne, go ahead.
So we defeated the motion to...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was, I think, 5 against, or 5-4, and everyone else against. Yeah.
But then what about the motion?
So that motion was defeated. So the motion that was recommended can still be put forward if need be, but it technically hasn't. So.
Okay, so before we move on to the next item.
Yeah.
Is any, I mean, if we defeated the deferral and now there's nothing.
Right
So
now.
is that the intention, is to do nothing? I
It's
guess
not-
that is the intention. Okay.
Actually, the intention, I think, was not to do nothing, but rather to do something.
Okay, if we move on, we're not making it clear to our staff what we wish them to do, if anything.
I know, I'm not moving us to the next item yet. I'm wondering if there's anyone who'd be willing to move the original recommendation. Dr. Haggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that the ACRD Board of Directors direct staff to work with BC Transit to include a new Prout Lake to Walmart transit route in the 3-year transit improvement plan for further consideration.
I'll second.
And by Director Koh. Further comments? Director McNabb, Director Shannon, and Director Roberts, and Dr. Cote. Okay,
so in that we have to go to referendum, and that's the only way I would ever accept this going forward at all. The value to Beaver Creek and the possibility of getting Beaver Creek residents to actually approve this service is negligible. There's no value. The route that's spoken of is completely outside the boundaries of Beaver Creek, and really will provide no benefit in any way, shape, or form. So the expectation of the taxpayers of Beaver Creek to actually approve us entering into this service, I think is just a pipe dream. So the idea of having further discussions with regards to this and moving away from the concepts that BC Transit has laid on the table to develop something that actually looks like it's an Alberni Valley transit system versus something that's a very pointed route. I think that's what we need to discuss. And I don't see that within this motion that lies here. I mean, there's further consideration, but what does that actually mean? And, you know, for Beaver Creek to be coughing up probably around $30,000 a year for a bus to nowhere is highly, highly unlikely.
Thank you. I have Director Shannon, Director Roberts, Dr. Cote, and Director Minions. Did I miss anyone else? Dr. Bottner. Okay. So Dr. Shannon, please go ahead. And then Dr.
Thank you.
Roberts.
I agree with Director McNabb with the motion, where if we're going to be exploring routes for the valley, the motion, I mean, is obviously pretty specific to Prout Lake. Is there a possibility, if we're just looking at possibilities for future consideration, that we make it a little broader for Alberni Valley routes or potential routes rather than specifically the Prout Lake one, but working off of what BC Transit has provided us already?
I believe that's possible,
I don't know how you want to take that, but that's my question.
And I think that's the root of the heart of the matter here. So that after maybe someone from staff can weigh in now, we can consider altering what the motion actually looks like to be more inclusive of the entire region so that it does address the interests of everyone. Mr. Williams?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we can definitely reach out to BC Transit and ask as we move forward on getting more details on what this service concept will look like in terms of deviations. Can it service more areas such as Beaver Creek and Beaufort, Cherry Creek, and broader with routes servicing those areas as well? That's definitely something that can be part of this.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any follow-up, Dr. Shannon?
No, I think my comment would be, though, like I'm happy to look into things, but obviously not commit to anything yet, because I know for my beliefs from my area would be, it would be pretty, because because we're kind of disconnected, if you will, from the city because of Beaver Creek and Cherry Creek, that it could be tricky. But I mean, that's all part of the process, and we can't make anything until we have some more information. And to me, that's what this is going to do, is provide us with the information. So down the road, we can do public input and make decisions.
Yeah. So that's my understanding as well. I have Director Roberts and then Dr. Cote.
Yeah, my comment was that I don't know if the transit direction, the transit route itself was fully laid out, but I like Mr. Williams' comment about having transit come out with a more detailed plan as far as going into Beaver Creek or Cherry Creek or in the other areas in particular. So I think it's been asked and answered. Thank you.
I think it's page 129 of the document. Director Cote and then Director Minions.
Thank you. Just commenting once again that this needs to be recognized and wanted by a community to have this service that they're going to be paying for. We need more information. I really want it to go back and get more information so that residents of all areas are going to be able to understand what the service is about, what it will provide for our communities, and connections for all areas. It doesn't need to be singled out. Although this is very specific about a route that also includes Tichat and Clicquot reserves. So we don't know, or do we know at this point, if the First Nations are interested in this service or not? So that would be a question.
So I know, but not in like I have a report, but I know that Tichat is interested in that for sure, just given the amount of people moving between those areas. I don't know about Hupatchisitt, but that can be done through the processes that we're talking about now.
I'd like to hear from staff actually on that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, the executive director for Tichat Nation has contacted me a number of times and got into a more fulsome discussion with Mr. Williams on exactly this matter. Yes.
The answer is yes.
Correct. In terms of Hupatchisitt, however, I have not been involved in a conversation with respect to transit with any representatives from the Hupatchisitt Nation.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any follow-up, Dr. Cote?
So that detail isn't in this plan either. So it's a big gap that needs to be also provided for information so that we have that information, so we know what we're looking at, because it's missing, and that is a big part of being able to provide a service to people there. There would be a lot of ridership, and the only way that the paratransit bus in the past is that we were looking at would work is if First Nations were also participating. It wasn't really we weren't looking at it as anything more than an extension of the handy dart. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. We need more information from the First Nations as well.
Yeah. And I think taking a running list or like keeping a running list of all the information we'd like would be very good. I apologize. Those are my dogs. We must have people over. I do have Director Minions and then Dr. Bottner.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with the motion as it's written. I do see it as a step forward, but that said, I think I would actually prefer that maybe to defeat this motion. And I would suggest possibly taking this back to an Alberni Valley and Bamfield committee, because I wonder if we have maybe moved too quickly. I think personally my preference would be, and I hate to say move too quickly in local government, because typically we all feel that is not the case. But I think that we do want to get this right. And I'm hearing a lot of support for more conversations about an Alberni Valley transit service that would incorporate all of our areas. And I think we would be a lot more successful looking at the entire Alberni Valley rather than focusing in just on this. I know we do have a start on that information. I wonder if this warrants more conversation on, you know, the greater Alberni Valley service before we decide just to move forward with a piece of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I have Dr. Bottner, and then we can do just that. It does sound like an option. Dr. Bottner?
Yes, I think that's one thing that's got to be very clear. Are we looking at public transit, or are we looking at something specific like people who need those para trips to like Handy Dart? And I don't know whether Cherry Creek has been approached about this before. I would be very surprised if they would be want to be interested in it, because we're already so close to all the amenities that are there. And I think that we really need to have some more public input to this. Thank you.
Yep, that sounds fine. As long as we're realizing that we're committed to having a wider conversation that fits with what I'd like out of this whole process. Okay, so unless there are no comments, we can go to a vote, and it might be good to defeat this so that we're a little more equal on this and we can actually achieve more of a consensus item. So all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion defeated. So what do we do to move forward then? So this can be just not dealt with, but given the conversations that we've had, Douglas, would we be able to have this put on the agendas of a relevant committee and then come back, given the understanding of everything we've said already?
Mr. Chair, I think you've actually got it right there, that the board could direct that staff put this back on an AV and Banfield committee for a broader discussion. And I'm sure that the board members will take these conversations into that next committee meeting.
And I think the only thing I would ask is if maybe we connect with some of the folks on the West Coast for any lessons learned for this process. That would be helpful too. Dr. McNabb, go ahead.
So I would make Douglas's motion, please.
Do we have a seconder?
And I'll second that. And just if I could clarify, if the motion is to refer this back to an Alberni Valley and Banfield committee meeting to discuss greater Alberni Valley regional transit service rather than just Prout Lake.
I will direct the corporate officer to make it that. Okay. Are there any further comments? Thank you. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
John, you're muted.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to 9.1a.
Sorry,
Mike,
John.
Yeah, Mike, if you want to take it away for the Colson one.
Sure. So this is a development variance application. The applicant's applying to vary the side yard setback from 15 feet to 8.3 feet. So this would be the first time the board would see this application. If the motions are approved, it would be referred out to neighboring property owners within 100 feet, as well as the Prout Lake Advisory Planning Commission. That's the staff's recommendations, and we would make sure the Planning Commission reviews this prior to bringing it back to the board for a final decision. And happy to answer any questions.
I have one just to clarify that this is just one multi-part motion, correct? It looks like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Dr. Cote, did you have any comments?
No, I could make the motion.
Okay.
I would recommend that the Board of Directors, one, consider issuing development variance permit DVD 20003, subject to neighboring properties being notified as per Local Government Act 499, and 2, refer this application to the Prout Lake Advisory Planning Commission prior to making a decision to issue or deny the permit as a subsequent at a subsequent board meeting.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director McNabb. And good to adding numbers there, Dr. Cote. I think we should start doing that just so that we can refer to them. I mean, it's boilerplate, but in the future, right? Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? This is just for EA directors. Okay, motion carried. All right, that brings us to 9.2, which is EA directors and Tofino. So, Mike, this is the Advisory Planning Commission meetings and public hearings during the COVID-19 provincial state of emergency.
Yes, and if I could maybe break this into 2 parts, and first I'll talk about the Advisory Planning Commissions, answer any questions, and then as a second part, talk about the public hearings, and then answer any directors' questions. So the first part regarding Advisory Planning Commissions, there's a new ministerial order that allows APC meetings to be held in the same manner that other committees and the board is conducting this meeting. We would hold them by Zoom, and where an applicant has an application before the APC, the applicant would be invited to participate in the APC meeting and then be able to present the application and answer any questions that the APC members may have. And we would do this by Zoom. We want to make it as simple as possible for the Advisory Planning Commission members, to recognizing that they're all volunteers in this process, and you know, each APC is required to have a chair and secretary, and we often assist with the minutes, but there's still a secretary for the Advisory Planning Commission. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board members may have.
Any comments or questions? Dr. Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a comment. I'm really happy to see that we're able to do this, because I know there was a lot of concern from members on the Beaufort APC that they would lose that opportunity for input. So I'm just really happy to see that this came down from the province, that we're able to make this happen with our APCs in the electoral areas. Thank you.
Any further comments? Okay.
I can move on to the second part if you.
Please go ahead.
And I'm also, as staff, we're really happy that this change has happened. APCs always provide good, valuable input to all the applications they review. For the second part of the report, I just want to touch on public hearings. And so in this one, staff is still recommending that the board consider on a case-by-case basis waiving public hearings when that's an option under the Local Government Act. So this part isn't related to COVID. The board and local governments have always had the ability to waive certain public hearings. So, for example, if a rezoning application complies with an official community plan amendment, the board doesn't have to hold a public hearing. We still have to do public notification and public input, and I'll explain how that would work. I want to make sure that's clear. So the province, under this new ministerial order, also has provided provisions to have public hearings, and I certainly feel that sort of in addition to some applications, you know, if an OCP amendment is involved, for example, the board we must hold a public hearing. But there also may be other applications where it's fairly clear, or it's a significant change in land use that we may be coming back and recommending that the board hold a public hearing. There's going to be others where staff, if that's the direction the board gives us, will recommend that the board waive public hearing. The process would be that we would still have to put 2 advertisements in the newspaper, same as we do for a public hearing. There's still signage put on the property, as well as neighbor notification. So the current bylaw requirement, and which flows into the legislation, requires that everybody within 100 meters, all property owners and residents within 100 meters are notified of the bylaw changes, proposed zoning change. When there isn't a public hearing, there's still the opportunity for residents to provide input by email or letter. There's still the opportunity to contact staff, ask questions. it doesn't contravene anything if a neighbor or any resident contacted a director and had a question. The other part of this is if there was significant feedback and sort of after the board passes the resolution to waive the public hearing, staff does the notifications, we get feedback, there would still be an opportunity for the board to put things on hold and then hold a public hearing if they felt it was necessary. So that option is also there for the board. And I would note that in the guidance we've received from the province, especially during the COVID state of emergency, that the province is advising that the board consider waiving public hearing notices where that opportunity presents itself. I have been in contact with some colleagues from the Nanaimo Regional District and have examples of the notice and the resolution that would come before the board. So we're certainly proposing that we do this on a case-by-case basis. Really, right now, we're looking for, in principle, does the board support considering that? And it will help us decide going forward. We do hold a significant number of public hearings over, through each year. We have 2 applications that have had first reading that if the board supports staff's recommendations, we will be bringing back next month to waive the public hearing. It's going to be, we have to give consideration to how we will hold public hearings. Not everybody has access to the same level of technology. We'll need to make, and there's certainly some additional logistical challenges to holding a public hearing versus an AEPC meeting or the board meeting, for example, because the purpose of an APC meeting is to hear from the applicant and then the APC feedback, whereas the purpose of a public hearing is the public input. So that's the key. So how best we get that input. And so I'll stop there and answer any questions that any directors have.
Dr. Cote.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Erg. I know that we have the zoning bylaws that we're looking to adopt. Don't we usually normally have a public hearing for that? And would this be able to cover that as well?
So if you're referring to the overall zoning bylaw for the regional district, like the rewrite that we're working on right now?
Yes, thank you.
So that would definitely require a public hearing.
Okay.
So would that be covered then under this? It's not a normal public hearing, or is all public hearings just considered to be the same?
All public hearings are the same. So certainly if we get to the point and we're still in the current state of emergency situation where we do have the ability to hold a public hearing electronically, and that could be for the zoning bylaw as well.
Yeah.
But there's sort of 2 parts to this. For bylaws that do require a public hearing, staff will work to set them up. We hold a number of public hearings, or we deal with a number of rezoning applications each year. And the rezoning, to adopt the rezoning bylaw doesn't require a public hearing, and rather it could just be done through notifying the neighbors and then receiving written input.
Yeah, so just to kind of reflect this back to you, the way that I understood this is that it explains that there's a difference between a public hearing, and you capitalize both the P and the H there, and that's a legal process that exists and is defined. And M139 establishes that you can hold public hearings electronically during the COVID situation. But then the briefing note also goes into the understanding that some of the decisions that might use a public hearing don't necessarily have to, and that this briefing note kind of puts forward the understanding that even if you can have a public hearing, you don't necessarily need to if certain circumstances are met or prerequisites are met, like the examples that you've granted. So the way that I've tried to wrap my head around this is that it's just asking that we seriously consider waiving some of those ones that don't necessarily need a full-bore public hearing, because we can still get public input, written and get public engagement done in a way that fits with the expectations of how you make a good decision, but it won't meet the test of a public hearing. Is that fair?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. So thank you for that. That's just for me at that point. But the next step then is, oh, sorry, are there any other comments or questions? Dr. Cote.
Thank you. So, Mr. Erg, you said that you were talking with colleagues in the same planning department in other communities. Are they having any difficulties with holding public hearings? I'm just referring back to public hearings from the past where speakers have gotten up multiple times and have received information. So how will we get the information out to the public when they've asked a question? Because at the end of a public hearing, we're not allowed to receive any more new information. So I'm just wondering, do we have something in this process where we can have speakers multiple times and receive information so that we don't compromise a public hearing?
Yeah, certainly we will, if and when we get to a situation where we're holding a public hearing electronically, we'll certainly have the processes and procedures in place to address those. We'll have to have a speakers list. We've got some ideas. Alex is actually on a webinar right now going over exactly these things. So we will have this, and we're gonna follow what other areas have done. This ministerial order is brand new, so I think people are just figuring out how it's going to work. So that's one component of the report. The other component of the report is, where we, do we consider waiving public hearings in certain instances? And so my reference to getting the motions from other jurisdictions is, I've got some examples of how that's been done. For example, in an Nanaimo regional district. So, it has nothing to do with the state of emergency related to COVID. It's just jurisdictions, regularly waive notice of public hearing if it complies with, if the zoning bylaw or zoning amendment complies with the OCP. So that's what we're looking at. Now, that's something that we haven't wanted to do in the past, and we've, held public hearings, and we may not get anyone show up, and just, there is other ways to proceed with those land use development applications, and there is still public input. I just wanted to make sure that was clear and get a sense, does the board support staff coming back to the next meeting with some applications and recommending waiving a public hearing?
Okay. So just generally, are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Dr. Shannon, I may have crossed you off before I got to you, so I'm going to put you in front of Dr. Roberts, if that's okay. So do you have a comment still?
Yeah, thank you. I'm struggling with this part. If we're allowing through this ministerial order that we can have APCs, I'm really struggling with taking away part of an opportunity for the public to have input for something. Whether it's perceived or not that we're taking something away, even though there's other avenues of public input, I would rather see us, to the best of our ability, make these public hearings happen and not give ourselves the ability to waive a public hearing or not, for public perception and just being transparent and keeping it how it is, for some regularity and continuity, even during COVID, of how we would normally do things instead of changing things while this happens. Because if we're able to do it electronically, I guess what I'm saying is I'd rather see us do that than say, oh, we don't really need one for this because it applies to this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Roberts, and did I miss anyone?
Could I?
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry,
Yeah, if I could just address that first, because certainly, we put that thought, and I understand, where Director Shannon's coming from. I think in this, and we need to consider the options for input. So, in a normal, in the old normal. We would hold a public hearing. Sometimes people would write letters and send emails in. That would be part of the public hearing record. People would come in and present, in person their statements. Sorry. And but under today, people can't come into the office and do that. And it is going to be, logistically, it's going to be a challenge to hold, 19 or 20 electronic public hearings. And sorry. And there is another way to get public input. So we still sort of, whether we hold a public hearing or whether we waive notice of public hearing, we're still required to put 2 ads in the newspaper. We're still required to sign the, to provide a sign saying that the rezoning application is happening, and the notice talks about how input can be provided. And we would still accept public input from anyone who felt their interest in property was affected. This is a process that lots of local governments, both regional districts and municipalities, have done for a number of years. This has been, they've had that ability. And then, really, we need to make sure that we're getting as much information. The board is getting all of the information they can to make a good land use decision. And also, I guess we want to look at what's in the public interest overall. Is it in the public interest to move, to proceed with those applications where it's supported by the community? And then, as I mentioned before, if there was, say, a significant amount of concern or a number of letters opposed to an application, where we'd waive the notice of public hearing, the board always has the option to say, in this specific circumstances, we're gonna hold a public hearing before we proceed with third reading and adoption. So, I think it's those things, because I'm concerned that the additional work would need to go into doing this is going to delay our development application process. So we want to be fair to the public in general, and also to the people that are coming in with their applications. And each one would be on a case-by-case basis. So each one, the legislation requires this. So the board just can't blanket say, where possible, we're going to waive a public hearing notice. They have to pass a specific resolution in the same way that when they pass the resolution to delegate it to an area director. So we have this meeting here, but then on each application, the board will need to make that specific recommendation. And the ones we would be bringing to the board for the recommending that a public hearing note be waived would be those applications that sort of in our assessment comply with the OCP, fit the neighborhood, with what's already there, and they would be for those ones that where in the past we've held public hearings and one or two people may show up, or in lots of instances nobody but the applicant shows up. So I just wanted the board to consider that and get, as staff, we want some direction.
Thank you. So I have Dr. Roberts next.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Mike. I also echo Director Shannon's comments. I think that if there's any kind of an issue or a potential problem, that these referrals, if you will, be brought back to the board for further direction. I want to ensure, and I'm hearing that from you, Mike, that that the public interest is paramount in this, and we would certainly love to have input in it as well. Thank you for that.
Okay, so thank you. Any further comments? So we've had a few directors kind of state they were uncomfortable with the whole idea of even I think the message is don't expect to be waiving much in the way of public hearings. I don't hear that we wouldn't necessarily do it if there's like a zoning application that's pretty straightforward that fits with the OCP, but I think the plan might be to prepare for all of them if need be. I don't know. I'm trying to interpret what I've heard so far. So maybe the right answer is just to say that out loud and then move forward without a motion. Douglas, I'm just going to ask, are there clarifications that you might want beyond what we've just said here?
Well, a couple of observations, Mr. Chair. The second recommendation is really meant to give staff the instruction to present waiving public hearing where it's legally allowed in the circumstances. And the board might find itself in certain circumstances where everybody's quite certain that a public hearing will be unnecessary, given there are other ways to do that. If the board doesn't want to do that, of course, then that second motion doesn't need a mover and a seconder and doesn't need to be debated. And then the public hearing will be part of the recommendation each time. The first recommendation is, I think, fairly straightforward in that APCs via electronic meetings, now that they're permitted under the ministerial order, a recommendation, or pardon me, a resolution on that would be appreciated, and then we would create the opportunity in each of our recommendations going forward.
Okay, so what I heard there, and I'll get right to you, Director Roberts. What I heard there is that if we pass this motion, we can still reject the idea of waiving any of these things. We just have to do it every time it would come up if the recommendation ever came our way to do that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so as long as we understand that we could do that, we could pass the motion unchanged at that point and just let you know now that we're probably not going to waive many or any of them. Dr. Roberts, and then Dr. Cote, and Dr. Shannon.
Yes, I'd like to make that first motion that the Board of Directors direct staff to refer development applications to electoral area APCs and hold electronic meetings in accordance with Ministerial Order M139.
And just cut it off there and just do that as a separate motion? Okay.
Yes.
Second. Penny.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I'll put that as Roberts and Cote. Any further comments there? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay. And then the second part is on the next page of the part. I think that's the one we're kind of more uncomfortable with as a group, it seems. Dr. Cote and then Dr. Shannon.
Thank you. So just a question around waiving the public hearing. So would that be up to staff recommendation or would that be director's recommendation?
Go ahead, Mike.
So, Director Cote, it is the board has to pass the resolution every time. So the process would be on a new rezoning application is staff would prepare a report. It would go to the Advisory Planning Commission. They would review it. One of the the recommendations would be that bylaw XYZ be given first reading, that the Board of Directors waive the requirement for public hearing for bylaw XYZ, and that staff be directed to notify neighboring property owners within, as required, and the ads be placed in the newspaper. So that would have to happen. A separate motions required for each bylaw every time that happens.
Go ahead.
Can I continue? Thank you.
Yeah.
So if there is, I'd imagine this has to go out into the neighbors or into the paper publication, and then waiving the authority to waive the public hearing. But because I know that there's a time frame when you have to publicize a public hearing, that time would be shortened then if you didn't have the public hearing. But if there's communication coming from the public that there needs to be a public hearing, then that would extend the time and we would hold one then?
I can explain sort of So if the public hearing was waived for a specific rezoning application, we still put the ads in the newspaper. We got feedback, and based on that feedback, the board felt that a public hearing was required. The board could then, sort of at the next board meeting, when they're considering the letters and correspondence that has come in, direct staff, pass a resolution to hold a public hearing for bylaw XYZ. So I mean, that would still be an option for the board.
So that would make the process longer then?
That would make the process longer, yes.
But not necessarily cannabis longer. So, I mean, there's that too, right? So, so with that, it does seem like we can have the option to waive as long as we understand that it's not likely we're going to. But there may be one or two instances where it's a non-issue as determined by the directors or the person most affected. So that being said, I do have Director Shannon next, and Director Roberts, did we want to go back to you, or were you just, yeah, okay. Please go ahead, Director Shannon.
Thank you. Well, I can appreciate and understand the intent behind all this. I don't like the option of us giving us to waive a public hearing. If this order is allowing us to have a public hearing in a different way, that, I mean, is the new normal for right now, I would rather just stick with that rather than change the way we do things process-wise. Again, for continuity, how we usually do it, and giving us the option to take away input, I really fear is going to be perceived as us taking away democracy, call it, from the public if they see it that way. So I'm glad we did this in 2 steps, because as this sits right now, I'm not supportive of it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Roberts?
I guess that it all depends on how long the ministerial order goes on. For expediency's sake, for staff, that is, dealing with holding public hearings. But I understand that recognizing that public notification and public input is still mandatory. I don't know if there's a way around it. And I agree with Director Shannon to a point. I don't want to see the democratic input disturbed at all. Is there any way that we can assure that that is going to continue to happen irregardless of this ministerial order? Thank you.
Mike, do you want to take that, and then we'll go to Dr. Bottner?
Certainly, I mean, it is always the board's option. Part of the reason we're bringing this forward is that it's not going to be a normal public hearing. Having people phone in or Zoom in to a public hearing is not going to be the same situation. And I guess really the consideration is can that feedback be received through email or by letter, and is it just as effective, or is it somehow different? Is really what we're putting forward, and that's up to the board. Has to make that decision. It's also it's also going to be if we make mistakes in doing it or drop people off the line, do we need to do another another electronic public hearing? There's those kinds of things to consider. We've never done one before. I don't think, I don't think anybody in BC has done one electronically like that before. So those are just some things to factor in, and want to make sure, the primary part of the public input process is to get the public input. And if the board, and really this is the board's decision, if you are comfortable with or feel that the public input received through email or letter, that through the notification is going to give you the information you need to make a decision, versus having that electronic public hearing, is that going, is the electronic public hearing going to help make a better land use decision for the board? And that's really what it comes down to. And whatever the board decides, we will make we will make work. I just want everybody to sort of know what I know at this point in time.
All right. Thank you for that. I have Dr. Bottner, and then I have a comment, and then.
Yes, I agree with Director Shannon. I feel the more that we can keep things the same right now, the better. And it, like you were saying, that this making a change hasn't been done yet, so who knows how the outcome is going to be. So if we keep things more the same, then there's less chance, I think, from getting negative feedback from the public.
Okay, thank you. So I think the only thing I'm going to say is that I think if we don't want to do anything in regards to getting staff to start doing the work on preparing a waiver decision in the future, we just do nothing. But the one thing I'd like, not necessarily to confirm, but just to remind everyone of, is that if we are committing to more public hearings through electronic means, there will be difficulties and there will be problems with how it goes through, given the connectivity and the degree of technological understanding people will have to have. And so I'm going to take a page out of kind of phone bank workers and going, sometimes the problem will exist between the keyboard and the chair, and not me as the chair, but the chair that they're sitting on. And that even if someone who's calling in or zooming in has difficulty, that's not on the staff, and that's not on the process, that's on us, or on the person who's having their own difficulties. That if you're going to have a public hearing, you're going to accept all of the flaws that come with doing it through Zoom, because we've already seen that there are flawed processes coming and doing it traditionally anyway. So people will fall through the cracks because they're not going to understand how the computer works. I'm okay with that. And part of the reason why I'm okay with that is because we're trying best efforts then, right? So having waivers, that's reasonable efforts. Doing public hearings, understanding that there'll be flood, that's best efforts. And I think that that's over and above what we need. That being said, I'm okay with not doing anything, but I just want to remind everyone here, if we do public hearings and then you get calls afterwards because some person who doesn't understand how to use Zoom or drops before they get to ask their question, that's just a part of the cost. Because we will communicate how to do it, and that's just how it's going to have to work. So it's just accepting flaws for flaws at that point. And as long as we understand that and we're committed to the fact that that's going to happen, then I think we're okay. We can make decisions on whether or not we have to redo something. It's just, it can't be at the drop of a hat because one or two people clicked the red button instead of the green button. If it's all right, we can move on to item 9.3 then. And this is for all directors, and it's voted. And after we get through the planning matters, I'm going to call a recess because I really have to use the washroom. Okay. So item 9.3A is for everyone. It's the Council for Agricultural Water Supply Project. Is this still you, Mr. Erg?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a grant related to the agriculture plan, and staff recommends that the board execute this grant agreement, and that I just wanted to note that the matching funds required are already in the regional planning budget under the sustainability section intended for this purpose.
Great. Director McNabb.
I'd move that the board of directors authorize the CAO to execute a grant agreement with the Real Estate Foundation of British Columbia to engage in the Council for Agricultural Water Supply Project.
Do we have a seconder? Director Shannon. Any comments? Seeing none? All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, it's a two-parter. Go ahead, please, Mr.
I would move that the board of directors authorize staff to advertise a request for proposals to seek a qualified contractor to coordinate the project.
And seconded by Director Shannon. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to LIDAR. Item B. Please go ahead, Mr. Erk.
So this is just the province would like us to sign this agreement. The board authorization is required. We already have the data. So.
Did they still just send a hard drive, or do they do it over the internet now?
They do it over the internet.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're bugging us to get this signed. So.
Okay.
Well, in that case, I'll move that the board of directors authorize the CAO to execute the data use license agreement between the ACRD and the province of BC.
Seconded, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Coates. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay. I know I have to use the washroom, but if everyone would like to keep going, then perhaps our vice chair can keep us moving. But I think maybe a 5 to 10 minute break might be good. So if we're all back by 3:45, is that all right? Okay. I don't know if we need a motion, but let's just do it.
Do it by unanimous consent.
Yes. Okay. Everyone, please come back by 3:45. Thank you.
Did everybody leave you, Dave?
It's not the first time and probably won't be the last.
Okay. Do we have most everyone back? Oh, we'll change to the Tree of Gondor. And Director Johnson has a map of in her background as well.
Middle-earth.
Alrighty. Okay. All right, I think that's enough people to kick off and move into staff reports. So I'm wondering if anyone wants to pull anything out of staff reports. We have the Fire Services Annual Report, the Transit Update, Waste Reduction, Landfill Annual Report, and the Banfield Committee Report. If not, we could just move to receive items A to D.
So moved. I'll move to receive items A through D of the staff reports.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne. Do we have a second? Alrighty, I'll put Dr. Bottner. I think her hand moved first. Any further comments? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Everyone moved around once we were connected, so it's hard now. Okay. Okay, that brings us to item 10.2, which is the Dry Dock Committee Update Report from Director Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last board meeting, when the directors are giving their committee reports, it kind of dawned on me that because I was appointed to the Dry Dock Committee as a director, then I should be giving updates as well. So I gave a very short summary of the project to date and where the committee is at on this project. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. I may not be able to answer it at this point, but I'd be happy to answer them at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, could we get a motion to receive the report? Thank you, Director Shannon, seconded by Director McNabb. Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, and I would acknowledge that Director Beckett has sent me a message saying that he has to bow out at 4:25, so I'll just check in with you when we hit that time, Dr. Beckett. Okay, that brings us to 10.3 other reports. That's the Port Alberni Port Authority quarterly update. I'm not certain who would speak to that, though. Okay, Dr. McNabb?
Motion to receive the report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Dr. Bottner. Okay, any further comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, any unfinished business? Seeing none. No late. Oh, Director Roberts.
If I may, I just received a notice from the fire chief in Cote that next Wednesday, the 20th at 9:30 in the morning, they're going to be instituting a tsunami evacuation siren, and that process will continue on for a couple of hours. So I don't know if anybody's going to be out at Banfield or not, whether or not they'll hear it. It all depends on the volume, but notice has been sent out to Cote, and I've notified the communities in the surrounding area that are involved in Area C. So hopefully that gets out, and it's a good practice for sure. And thanks for that.
Okay. Could we get someone from staff just to kind of send out a reminder on that Monday with the actual times? I missed the times, Cal.
Sorry, it's Wednesday, May the 20th.
Yeah.
At 9:30 in the morning.
9:30. Okay.
That's one way to get the tourists out of town.
All right. Thank you for that update. I'm just gonna let that stand. I think that's an important announcement to make. Question period.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead, Douglas.
Just going to say yes, we will do that and echo that message out. Thank you.
Dave, if you're still online, do you have any comments or questions? Not comments, sorry, questions.
If Rob can give me a call after this meeting so I can do an interview with him. I understand you're going to be in camera for a while, so just if Rob can give me a call at the station, or I can call him, whichever.
Okay. Alrighty. I think that brings us to item 14, which is the recess for the Regional Hospital District meeting.
Mr. Chair, sorry,
Please go
before we go forward, we had set up an email address for the public if they wanted to provide any input into the agenda or had any questions.
Oh, my apologies. Yes, it is
yes,
written
so
in here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to report that we have not received any public input or comments to the email address for today's meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank
so
you.
the email address is responses@acrd.bc.ca.
That's correct.
Hopefully we'll get a question one day. Okay, now we'll move to item 14, which is the recess. Could we get a motion to recess this meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Coot.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, Madam Chair.
All right, thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I will call to order our Alberni Clayoquot Regional Hospital District Board of Directors meeting for Wednesday, May 13th. We're starting at 3:51. Recognize that I am speaking to you from Taloquit territory and that we are all in Nachalnath territory, or I'm not actually entirely sure where everybody is. So here on Vancouver Island in a variety of territories, and acknowledge our appreciation for that. I would ask first, please, for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Director Cote. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. And we have some minutes from the Board of Directors meeting that was held April 8th for adoption.
So moved. Director Roberts.
Second.
Thank you, Director Roberts and Director Jack. Were there any errors or omissions noted in the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Oh, very nice, Director Bottner. I like the heart. Okay, so we're going to move right into the financial statements, and we have the audited financial statements. Terry, did you have anything you wanted to say by way of introduction, or?
Just briefly, that these are much less complicated statements than the regional district. As the hospital district, we do not own any assets. It's basically the debt for the West Coast General Hospital and an annual grant to Island Health to support our region's capital infrastructure that's related to health, and that we require approval by the board of directors before we can finalize the audit.
Thank you very much. Did anyone have any questions about the audited statements? Yes, Director Bottner.
Yes, thank you. Just because I knew this may not sound like a necessary question, but what came out of it as I was reading was on page 23, it called for net financial assets and accumulated surplus. Now in 2018, it was $603,835, but it seemed to be triple that in 2019, $1,836,742. And I was just wondering why there would be such a discrepancy in the amount.
What page, sorry?
It was page 23 under net financial assets and accumulated surplus.
Okay, so the hospital district statements are very strange because we don't have assets. So normally you have this balancing portion that's kind of offsetting the amounts. Whereas in this case, they're going to fluctuate from year to year based on how much we provide out in grant money. There were some big projects such as the Tofino General Helipad project that we gave out a lot more cash in 2019 for projects like that to Island Health. Yeah, I'm trying to think how else to explain it, but it's the grants and the commitments to the Island Health that really changed year over year.
Okay, thank you. That helps a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Director Bottner. Are there any other questions about the statements? Okay, in that case, maybe I could turn your attention to the motion. Director Jack?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the Albany-Clayoquot Regional Hospital District Board of Directors approve the 2019 audited financial statements for the Albany-Clayoquot Regional Hospital District as presented.
Second, Paul Beckett.
Seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay, so now we'll just go through our reports as we usually do. And maybe it's a little bit out of the typical custom, but I think just during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, if anybody has any particular comments they want to make about the healthcare or hospital or anything in your area, it's always helpful to have. I know we have the opportunity on Fridays to talk as a policy group, but in case there's anything you want to add today, we'll start off with Bob Beckett from Bamfield. Any report from Bamfield? Oh, you're just muted there still, but that's okay. Now you're not.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I spoke with Nurse Dunn yesterday. She identified that they're now able to do COVID-19 testing on site at the health center. So that allows folks that are concerned to not have to make the long journey in. So that's the only thing. It's all good in Bamfield. We're looking forward to a quiet, long weekend.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, the Alberni-Clayoquot Continuing Care Society, Director McNabb?
No report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. West Coast Native Healthcare Society, Director Cote?
No report, and that's good news.
Okay, well, we like that. Tofino General Hospital, I can tell you, I think that things are going very well there right now. Of course, during the pandemic, our communities have done a really fantastic job of keeping in the region of keeping, away from the hospital unless they need to, but the hospital staff are certainly encouraging everybody to come forward if they feel the need to and not to avoid it because of fear of overloading them. They're not overloaded at this point. And we still have a trailer set up outside our hospital, and that's the kind of reception and testing area. They have administered dozens of tests here, so they're certainly active and able to meet the needs of what people need here. So that's good news to report. Anybody, Director Cole? Yeah, please.
I'll just add that in the last couple of weeks, we have seen an influx in hospital visits and ambulance transportation, of which we are seeing a small increase as well in testings at the hospital of people with non-local addresses. So there is a small indicator that there are people coming here and then feeling sick, all testing negative, but people either coming here and then feeling sick or of the sort. And we are very close to being out in the community and testing in people's homes for those that are transportation challenged. So I want to say next week, but I can't remember what Dr. Marshall actually said in our meeting today, but we're very close to it. So that will be of added value to those that have that challenge of transportation.
Thank you for that. And yes, Dr. Marshall has told us a little bit about the increased number of non-local address visitors needing tests. And of course, that's really important for us to know, and a big subject of discussion today at our Economic Recovery Task Force meeting around that feedback loop that's really required between the tourism industry, the local government, the hospital, knowing who is in town and what they need so that we can really appropriately monitor and hopefully not see our tourism numbers increase too quickly. But we'll see what happens. There's a bit of apprehension about that, I think. Director Roberts?
Yeah, thanks for that. Just a little update. There was a resident from Area C that was concerned about going to the hospital because of the COVID issue, but determined that it was very important that they went, so that she and her husband went to the hospital. They were in Tofino. They were extremely well received. There wasn't any question, and it happened to be a cardiac issue, and they were treated, and said that the doctor had said to them that, you know, it's extremely important that you come here and we will deal with you at any time, irregardless of the COVID situation. And
Yeah.
so quite impressed with that. And thanks to everybody there. It was amazing. Cheers.
Thank you very much. That's really good to hear. Alberni Clackwood Health Network, Director Cote.
Thank you. We have a meeting next week. Really happy that our coordinator, Marcy DeWitt, is part of the EOC now. So she has a good connection on the West Coast to be able to coordinate with the Alberni Valley on health issues. So very happy about that. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. West Coast General Hospital, any of our Port Alberni or Valley directors have any comments? Dr. Minions?
Sure, thank you. Similar to some of the West Coast commentary around, encouraging people to go to the hospital, we did hear from our local healthcare providers that over the last couple of weeks, we've actually seen an increase in people needing to be admitted to the hospital. And the feeling there has been that from the healthcare professionals is that people have been putting off coming to the hospital. I think that the thought behind that is certainly from my perspective, very appreciated that people are trying to kind of hold off and make sure that what they need to go to the hospital for is relevant because they don't want to put extra pressure on our healthcare services. But the message from our healthcare professionals is please do not do that. So if you need medical attention, please do go to the hospital or utilize the regular services that are available to you, because they certainly are seeing now that people are coming in worse shape than if they would have sought medical attention earlier. So I think that's a really important message and important for us to know that in, the Alberni Valley, we do have healthcare services available. And so just encouraging people to use those as soon as they need them. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, anything that's been missed? Director Jack.
So I guess from the Huayet perspective, I just wanted to underline and appreciate the communications processes and what we plan on doing in the lead up to the May long weekend. So from my nation, we're appreciative of being included in that process and making sure that kind of the other West Coast is kind of being brought forward as well. And I think the only other health related thing I'm glad that Director Means has brought that up about the West Coast General Hospital. Is that I believe it was Island Health that just released a it was an opiate advisory. So
Yeah.
you may see something happening there, and I think that's just something we need to be aware of, and just acknowledge that's happening. But I guess I've done that
Yeah,
now.
thank you for that. Yeah, I think that that's a just a strong indicator that the pandemic, although we're doing everything we can to protect people's health from COVID-19, that there are other things going on in people's lives, and the changes, the economic and social disruption that we're experiencing right now is still affecting people's health in other ways. And it is a really difficult job to walk that fine balance of essentially two public health emergencies that we're facing in the province right now, along with all of the care and attention that people normally need. So yeah, thank you for that, Director Jack. Anything else? If not, then a motion to adjourn, unless Wendy, did we have any responses to the, for questions? I'm guessing not, but.
No responses were received or questions.
Thank you. Director Roberts?
I make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Seconded by Director McNabb. All in favor? Thanks very much.